Hello and welcome to SDN Tech Forum. Today, in this video, VMware for Network Engineer Part 2, we are going to learn how to work with ESXI interface, right? So in previous video, we installed ESXI software on a bare metal host Nuke, Intel PC, mini PC. In this video, we will talk about the interface and how to monitor and manage the ESXI. And then we will take one step further and try to see how to work with datastore, understand VMware networking, what are the networking options are available there, like virtual switches, VNIC, VM kernel, and all those things. Then we will try to deploy a virtual machine, and finally I will show you how to work with VMware CLI. In case you do not have access to the ESX UI for some reason, you can still attach to the shell and pretty much do everything what you can do from UI, right? So let's go ahead and start the video. As you can see, this is our ESXi. Let's log into this. Okay, so since it is available in my network, I can reach it from my development machine. I really do not need to connect to the KVM of the host, right? The ESXi shell is available on HTTP pretty much anywhere in the network. So this is the quick snapshot of the host where the ESXi is running. You can see the version is 7.0 update 3, and uptime on the right side we have CPU, memory, storage. On the left side down here we have all the hardware details, how much CPU I have, like I have 4 CPUs, memory, virtual flash, current networking, IP addresses and everything, storage information. So this is a very nice snapshot. We can obviously double click and go look more inside, and for that what you can do, you have to click on manage. So you can see there is a left side pane. This is the typical UI layout, and then right side you have a couple of selectable or clickable field, right? It's like system, hardware, licensing. So under system, the things what you would like to do is make sure that your time and date is proper, and then a couple of services are here. So you can, for now you can ignore them. Hardware, to get more hardware information, especially on your PCI devices, right? What interfaces you have available, all those details. If driver supports them, they will be listed here. Okay. You can reboot the host from this interface as well. Licensing is very important. So as you can see, I'm running eval license, and these are the features available right now in my ESXi, right? What happened after 60 days? Evaluation license is for 60 days. After 60 days, when the eval mode expire, some of these features may stop working. So that's why it is very important to assign the license, and this is how you can assign license. All right, packages. And I'm not going to click each and every tab, but I'm going to give you a very brief over idea how it works, right? So you can install packages now from UI, since UI is available. If you remember, first time we installed some VIP packages connecting directly to ESXi shell, but after that, once you have the UI available, you can pretty much do the same thing from UI, and this is much more convenient. Services, all the services, ESXi, when ESXi boots up, it instantiate a lot of services, and you can see their status here. Like one of the interesting services, DC UI, Direct Console UI. That's how we connected to ESXi shell, right? So this is base system service, and it's running. Another important service is VPXA, VMware's vCenter agent, and it is running. So far in our network, we don't have any vCenter, but in future when we have vCenter installed and this vCenter want to add this host, this is the service using that they communicate, right? So all ESXi by default, they have VMware vCenter agent services up and running, and we call it VPX heartbeats. All right, security and users. Users, right, by default you get root user and the role is administrator, but you can obviously go ahead and create more users and define their role. There are certain predefined roles already here, like read-only role, administrator role, but you can create your own role and assign privileges to it, right? So these are the few things. Let's look into monitor, host monitor quickly. Host monitor notification. If there is anything which you need to pay attention, like warning and critical, you will find that under notification. And this is telling me that ESXI shell is enabled, SSH is enabled. We did it by the intention, but these are not best practices, hence categorized as warning. Logs. All the system logs and different kind of logs are available here, and you can export them. You can actually connect to the shell and go to this location. So this tells you the location. You can probably import them, download them, or you can have a visual check here. Like for example, when this syslog logs, this is very interesting. DH client log. So when my ESXi boots up, how it is getting IP address, and if it have any problem getting IP address, I can see that from here in my logs, right? So this is very powerful logs feature. Some recent task you can see here, and then performance. It is, you remember initially when we logged in to the host, we got a snapshot of host, and here it is a granular view or double click view. Now you can see I have 4 CPUs, their utilization and everything, since they are dual core, essentially they make 8, and all those details you can find in much more detail. You can actually see last hour performance or maybe last 24-hour performance, all those things. Finally, let's look into the hardware. So right now, no additional storage and sensor available. So fine. So this is all about host, managing your host, monitoring your host. We are going to skip virtual machine for now. Let's go to storage quickly. And as you can see, by default, when we install this ESXi, datastore 1 got created, and it has taken up the entire SSD, since I selected that manually, that okay, reclaim all the disk space. So it is telling me what is my capacity, how much is provision, how much is free, what is the type. By default, type is vmware 6. Okay. You can, if you want to check what is inside the data store, the UI is very intuitive. That means you can double click on data store and you can browse data store. And then, as you remember, we have created a couple of folders. In first video, I created the web folder and updated the patch bundle. Today, I created an ISO file and I am uploading a ISO image to use in my virtual machine. This upload is TCP based or HTTP based upload. Hence, uploading a large file may take a lot of time. So it's not as efficient as SFTP or other file transfer protocol. So be patient with that. Right now you can see I'm uploading a 10 GB file, and maybe 20 minutes, it's still 22%. So definitely can take 1 hour or may fail, right? Depend on how you are uploading. It's a wired connection or wireless connection. Okay. So that's about upload. You can create further directories and upload things. Okay. You can increase capacity. If you decide to bring in additional storage, you can go ahead and increase capacity using a simple workflow. So the power of VMware is its simplicity. It's very simple, and that's its USP or the major appeal, right? Just like host, we have the monitor page here, but it's not too granular. It's mostly about the logs and other things, right? Now come to the very important part, which is networking. That's why we are here, right? VMware for Network Engineer. As you can see, when we install this ESXi, by default, a few things got created. That means we got virtual switch 0 created as part of install. And this is a standard virtual switch. Okay, there are 2 types of virtual switch standard and distributed virtual switch. We will talk about distributed virtual switch in vCenter video, right? By default, when you are working with ESXi, you cannot add or create any distributed virtual switch. For that, you need vCenter, because distributed virtual switch makes sense when you have more than one host, right? So we will talk about that in later videos. So this is my default switch. Let's double click and see what are the different components of virtual switch. And this snapshot or this illustration is very useful. As you can see, this is how my switch looks like. So I have uplink port, which is a physical adapter on my host. And then I have vNICs, right? So these are the virtual networks. And these are not individual NICs, they are actually a port group. So VM network is a port group, management network is a port group, which get associated with the virtual NIC, associated with the virtual NICs. So right now you can see in management network, I have a port which is VMK0, and this is VM kernel port. Okay, this is not a regular vNIC, but it's a VM kernel port because it is used to manage ESXi itself. When we create a new virtual switch and attach it to a VM, that time you will see that that gets associated with a vNIC. Okay, all the switch details are there. What is by default MTU, what is the link discovery mechanism, if there is any VM attached, and all those things. You can obviously do NIC teaming. That means you can bond your physical adapter together for resiliency, and that's the part this section talk about. Then security policy. By default, promiscuous mode is off, forge, transmit, and MAC changes are not allowed. These are security best practices. But sometime when you have a nested virtualization, that means several virtual machine internet working together, that time probably you may need to change these policies and allow a few things. Okay. But for now, best practices, vNIC and physical NIC one-to-one mapping, this is good enough. Okay, so this is all about virtual switch. You can add additional virtual switch as additional uplink if you want using add physical NIC, but we will do something different. What we will do, we'll go back to networking, and let's first explore all this and then come back and create a virtual switch. So physical NIC, all my physical NICs detected which are attached to this host will be listed here. I have two because I'm not able to use my inbuilt Realtek NIC. I don't know what driver it is. Again, if you know, please do let me know. For now, I'm working with two USB to RJ45 converters, and hence I have two physical NIC here. VM kernel NIC, by default it gets created, and that is VMK0. You don't need additional. TCP IP stacks, some TCP IP stacks are there. The default TCP IP stack is used for regular networking and VM kernel networking. But if you are doing advanced stuff like vMotion, then you will need another stack. Okay. Firewall rules. As I mentioned, when ESXi boots up, it starts a lot of services. To communicate with that services, there is an inbuilt firewall which open a few designated ports. So there is an inherent security is there, okay? But you can always cross-check it with your any physical firewall. But in ESXi, there is an inbuilt firewall, and what it is doing, it is allowing certain ports, right? For example, as you can see, DHCP client port 68 is enabled. That's the standard port. Yes, VMware SNMP is disabled. SSH, you can see this is allowed, and online update, vCenter update manager is allowed. See, this is the service we talked earlier, VMware vCenter agent, which runs on every ESXi host, and that uses a port of 902. So that means when it talks to vCenter, it uses this UDP port, and this service is running, this port is allowed. Okay, so if you have any physical firewall, make sure that if this ESXi crossing that firewall, make sure that those ports are also allowed there. And these are all well-known registered port, right? Below 1024. You can add and create new roles also, but we will not do it right now. Let's go back to vSwitch. Okay, and more networks. Port group, virtual switch. Let me create a port group first, or maybe we can, okay, let me create a port group first. I'm going to say my VM PG, my VM port group. VLAN ID 0 is fine, but I can always go ahead and change it to 1. Virtual switch. Okay, so it is asking me a virtual switch, but we have not created our virtual switch, so it's a bad idea. Let's go back and create a virtual switch first. Add virtual switch. This is my V S and associated uplink. So virtual switch 0 is already using VM USB 0. So only one physical NIC is left. Let me use that. MTU link discovery and other things looks fine. They are not mandatory, so just leave them to default. And now let's go back and connect. Right now, as you can see, this virtual switch is created. It has a uplink, but no port group. Let me go back. Okay. Traffic shaping and all those things look good. So let's go back and create a port group. And then we will associate that port group to our new virtual switch. Okay. Okay. Or this is my port group. Edit setting. VM network. Okay, so one port group is for one virtual switch, looks like. So we have to create another port group. Okay, and just like before, my VM PG, my VM port group, virtual switch 1 is available under dropdown, and I have created that. So now you can see we have a virtual switch which has a port group associated to that and a physical NIC. So now you can see this switch looks ready. So that means it has a port group which is ready to accept any VNICs from virtual machine, and it is already mapped to a physical adapter for external world reachability. I hope so far so good. We talk about hosts, we talk about storage and all the networking option. Now the final part before ESXI CLI, of course, is creating the virtual machine, because that's why we are here, right? No virtual machine, create and register virtual machine. You can always right click and select that, but or come back here and do that. So you can do OV install, or you can do a existing new machine, or you can register any existing. So we are going to create a new virtual machine using ISO. Okay. It is asking what is the compatibility. Compatibility is good. Give it a name, and I'm going to say Rocky Linux. Rocky Linux is an enterprise grade Linux, so it has all the bells and whistles minus branding. It is RHEL 8 in my network, so let's go and select RHEL 8. Next, data store. Let's use the same data store, one data store, not a problem. You can customize some settings, like how much CPU you want to allocate, how much memory you want to allocate, and your NICs. If you want additional NIC, you can also do that, right? So right now you can see network adapter is already connected to our intended port group, which is good. And CD DVD drive is host device, but I do not have any physical drive, right? I want them to read it from data store, but the ISO file is sitting in data store, right? The transfer is still not complete, so it's not a good idea to select this and power on. But let me select this. Still 3 GB. It has to be 10 GB or something, but let's go ahead and select it. We are saying that connect at power on. Yes, when we power it on, that this will be connected, network adapter and the host, right? So let's say if you want to increase memory, hard disk, and anything, you can do that. So let's allocate it 20 GB of hard disk. Say next. This is the summary of your configuration. As we say finish, a recent task will come here. You can see this VM is created fairly quick, right? In the blink of the eyes. but we have not powered it on. It's power off right now. Okay. So once we power on, it will read that from the data store and try to boot that ISO file. Okay. Uh, when you install VM, you may see some lags and other things with the mouse and the display. So it is a best practice to install VMware tools on that. All right, looks good. Let's go to our final task. We are not going to power on the machine because our data store is not ready. And let's verify again, it's still at 34%. So the final task is to connect to the shell and do things what we can do using CLI. So SSH is enabled from ESXI, so I can use the same IP address to connect to the, as you can see, I have misspelled the username. Root. So this is my SSH connection to the ESXI, and the command is syntax is pretty much vmcmd, and let's see if we can get help here, right? So this is the help section. You can say connect to this host, connect to this port, and all those things. Let's say we want to know all the services. Get SVC. Okay, so commands wise, I have to look a reference maybe to get all the commands. Okay, yes, on my screen I have some commands listed in my notepad. Okay, so this is vim command vm svc vm services. All these services are there. Okay, and that's what you can do. You can do get config, get data store, and other things. Let's do a very simple things. Since we already have one VM created, let's find the VM information. As you can see, get all VMs. We have Rocky Linux created, and it has a VMX version of 19, right? So if you want to power it on, and VM ID is 2. So this is very important. If you want to work with individual VM, you need to get their VM ID. That means what you can do, you can power it on or shut it down. I'm not going to issue this command because our VM is not ready, but as you can see, we can say vim command vmsvc power on and then the VM ID. Okay, same thing, what you can do, you can also shut it down. I'm just showing you these commands here, but you can always look into ESXi documentation or VMware documentation. So vim command vmsvc power dot shutdown and then the VM ID. This is how you can work with individual VM. You can also work with VM services in ESXi CLI. So if you have any script or anything, you can definitely use the CLI. Otherwise, UI is pretty intuitive and it works most of the time. Okay, as of our final check, we are ready to power on the VM because ISO upload in data store is now complete. So before we go ahead and power on the virtual VM which we created earlier, what we have to do, we have to modify a few settings. So go to virtual VM, edit settings. Here, as you can see, we have mapped our data store. So say power on at connect. This is the path, the complete path for that ISO. Okay, so this is good. Then go to VM option. Within VM option, what do you have to do? Go to boot option. The by default ESXi on this host is selected as EFI, but virtual machines may not be aware of this new gen BIOS. So go to legacy BIOS and you can only change the firmware boot options when the virtual machine is powered off. Okay, so let's change it to BIOS. You can also delay the boot so that you have some time to look at the boot prompt. So I'm going to say it's 1000 millisecond, which is probably 10 seconds, and say save. But this is what you have to make the changes here: firmware from EFI to BIOS. Say save. Settings are saved now. Reconfig VM task is completed. Now let's go ahead and power up our VM. Once you power up the VM, you see the console prompt change. You can always open a console, like open a browser console, and here you can see it is sitting in this media. I'm going to click and I'm going to say test this media and install Rocky Linux. Okay, so it has detected the bootable media from datastore and started reading the MBRs, master board records, and other sections. And from here onwards, it's just like spinning up or booting any other virtual machines, right? So this is what you can see is going on my screen. It's checking the media, and it will be ready with the boot config. Okay. Starting installer. So we will talk about how Linux system boots in a different video, Linux for Network Engineering, which is an upcoming resource. But here, as you can see, this is the prompt available, and now we can select our language and continue with the install. I'm not going to finish the install in this video because this is not related to VMware. This is typically a virtual machine instantiation, and I have a couple of videos which I'm going to put the link in description. You can watch them to know how to make the install. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in next video. Thank you.